in the heart of the Federation capital of Zoranthia, where towers pierce the sky and hovercrafts weave between monolithic pillars of glass. The Grand Academy stood like a symbol of excellence and equality. Its sprawling campus was home to the finest minds of dozens of species from across the galaxy. But equality was a facade here, at least for some. The midday sun glinted off chrome statues of unity and progress, casting long shadows across the plaza where students gathered for lunch. Tables shimmered under kinetic shields that adjusted for each species' ideal climate. The air was rich with aroma-pungent Grithan spices, delicate Tyrellian perfumes, sizzling human fried noodles. And yet, in the farthest corner of the plaza, past the recycling bins and next to a humming maintenance droid, sat Alira. She wasn't just any girl. She was Varna hybrid, part Zelvani, part something else, something the others refused to acknowledge. Her skin shimmered with a bioluminescent hue, subtle but unnatural. Her eyes reflected light in a way that made purebloods uncomfortable. Her mere presence was a reminder of the war the one her mother had ended by falling in love with a human officer, and for that, Alira was made to sit outside the dome. It was unspoken. No rule stated hybrids couldn't sit at the main tables. But when she tried, people stood, plates were lifted, conversations ended in awkward silence. Someone even sprayed decontaminant spray once, so she stopped trying. Instead, every day she quietly took her meal to the shadow table, the one with no climate shield, where heat and cold and ash from the nearby drone scrubber drifted freely. But she endured. She never complained, never begged. She sat straight, proud even when the food bots delivered her meals late, or cold, or occasionally not at all. Today, however, something shifted. As Alira unwrapped her ration cube, a small group of Zelvani students passed by. One of them, Kieran, son of a planetary governor, sneered as he walked by. "Still pretending to be one of us," he said loudly. "Must be fun eating with the garbage droids." The others chuckled, flicking their cape hams in mockery. Alira didn't look up. Her silence was the only shield she had left. But someone else noticed. Across the plaza, on a table filled with off-duty Earthburn cadets, sat Elias Riker, a second-year tactical command trainee. He was average in looks, rough around the edges, but with a gaze that absorbed everything. He had seen Alira before, seen the stares, the cruelty, the indifference of the staff, but like most others, he had said nothing. Until now. Today, something cracked. Maybe it was Karen's sneer. Maybe it was the way Alira's shoulders tensed for just a second, a silent recoil. Maybe it was the fact that Elias had seen this before on Earth, in the slums of post-war Detroit, where his sister had been spit on for her augmented eye. He knew that look. Without a word, Elias stood up, fork still in hand, half-eaten protein wrap dangling. He walked across the plaza. Heads turned. Conversations paused. His boots echoed like thunder against the polished stone. Everyone watched. Alira glanced up. Her eyes widened slightly, barely, but enough. Elias dropped his tray across from her, sat down, and said casually, "Mind if I join you?" A silence fell over the entire lunch courtyard. Karen froze mid-bite. One of his friends gasped. Iris stared, unsure if this was a joke. She said nothing. Elias took a bite of his food, chewed slowly, then smiled. "You always sit here?" he asked, brushing an ash flake off the table. Still no answer. Elias leaned in slightly. "Cool view," he said, gesturing toward the open skyline. "And the sun's real. None of that filtered dome crap. I like that." Alira blinked. "Why?" "Because real light burns," he said. "It tells the truth." A long moment passed, and then, for the first time in weeks, months, maybe, Alira smiled. That was all it took. The silence broke. Whispers spread like fire. Zelvani students stared in disbelief. One of the cafeteria bots froze in place, confused by the disruption of routine. An instructor looked out from a balcony and narrowed his eyes. But Elias didn't care. Neither did Alira. The boundary had been breached, and though small, it was irreversible. The next morning, the air in the Grand Academy pulsed with unspoken tension. What Elias had done was small, trivial to some, just a seat at a table, a shared lunch, a few words. But in the politics of species pride, especially within the elite halls of Zoranthia's Grand Academy, it was a rupture, one that could not be ignored. Whispers followed him down the corridors. Stares cut through him like lasers. Teachers hesitated before calling on him in class. Some even erased his name from morning participation logs. It was as if Elias had crossed into forbidden territory and they were waiting to see if he'd survive the other side. Alira felt it too. She noticed the glances from fellow hybrids, those who always kept their heads down. Today, they looked at her not with pity, but curiosity. A strange flicker of hope flickered behind their cautious expressions. For the first time, someone had stood beside her, not above Dot, and yet, danger brewed. By midday, Elias received a message on his neural node. Cadet Riker, disciplinary review. Hall D-17, immediate. He showed up to find himself standing before a small tribunal, not the official Federation Council, but something far more dangerous, the Social Harmony Committee, a shadow council of elite students and professors tasked with preserving interspecies unity on campus. Kar stood at the head of the room. So did three others, each representing high families, rich planets, powerful species. They weren't angry, not on the surface. That was the trick of power. They wore civility like armor. Karen leaned back, voice smooth. Cadet Riker, your recent actions have been noticed. Elias raised an eyebrow. Sitting with someone now counts as misconduct. Professor Lenva, a Torellian elder with gold-flecked feathers, interjected gently, of course not, but we must be mindful of how our actions may provoke discomfort among the majority. Elias smiled coldly. So I provoked discomfort. Got it. Karen stepped forward. You violated no laws. That's true. But social cohesion here is delicate. Your symbolic gesture could inspire instability. Inspire, Elias said. You mean encourage others to treat someone like a person. A pause. You're human. Karen said quietly. You may not understand the cultural context. Alira's mother defied interspecies protocols. Her union was illegal at the time. Her heritage is controversial. Elias folded his arms. You mean she exists? That's the controversy. Professor Lemma sighed. We're not here to debate history. We're here to recommend you choose your associations more wisely for your own future. Elias tilted his head. Is that a threat? Consider it guidance. But Elias didn't flinch. Consider this. I'm not afraid of you. Silence. Again. That night, a message from Earth Command buzzed in his inbox. We've received complaints. Diplomatic friction. Proceed with caution. Even Earth was backing off. But Elias had made his choice. Back at the Academy courtyard the next day, Alira waited at the same shadow table, unsure if he would return. Her fingers trembled slightly over her tray. The whispers around her had grown louder. Someone had even thrown a rotting fruit near her feet earlier quietly. So no one official could see. She considered leaving, but then dashed footsteps. Boost. She looked up. Elias stood there, holding the drinks and the sandwiches. Figured I'd try the synth chicken today. Looks radioactive. A slow smile returned to her face. And this time, she moved her tray to the side-making room. They sat together again, and across the plaza, several students watched with unreadable expressions. One of the younger hybrid students, who usually kept to the janitor wing, nodded once and moved closer to a nearby table. Still separate, but not far. Something was shifting. The fourth day came with a chill wind sweeping through the capital, even under the twin suns. Zaranthia's climate controls had begun to fail, ironically echoing the emotional climate of the Grand Academy itself. By now, Elias and Alira's seating arrangement had become the epicenter of attention, no longer whispered rumors now. It was full-blown controversy. Holonews reporters near the Academy gates had started probing, asking loaded questions. Are the hybrids forcing their integration onto high-value students? Is human sympathy undermining the integrity of Zelvani tradition? Inside, some students secretly recorded Elias and Alira eating. Uploaded clips began circulating with titles like The Hybrid and the Human, Rebellion or Romance, Contamination at Unity Plaza, Cadet Riker Breaks Protocol. The videos exploded across the Federation public network's view. Counts skyrocketing, especially on human colonies. Support poured in. So did threats. But Elias didn't stop. On this fourth day, he didn't just sit beside her. He brought a third chair. Then a fourth. Then, to everyone's disbelief, he invited another hybrid student, Mekyoro, a shy, three-eyed Narvelari mix who had never once eaten outside the Academy's sanitation wing. Come on, Elias said with a grin. We're doing an all-species lunch now. We need variety. Mek hesitated, trembled, looked around. No one moved to stop him, but no one helped either. Finally, he sat down. The droid bot delivering food paused mid-delivery, confused. It had Never served more than one hybrid at that table before. The moment was electric. Then others joined. One human girl, then a Krellix with a burnt-scarred chest, who had also suffered discrimination for his past. A quiet Terran male who always carried his tray to his dorm. One by one, they sat slowly, uncertainly but together. In minutes, the shadow table became the center table. Alira looked around, overwhelmed. I didn't ask for this, she whispered to Elias. No one asked for cruelty either. He replied, we're just making it fair. And then, a sound pierced the plaza. A snap. Kaeron stood atop the main academy stairs, with a flick of his hand. For security, drones were into position and hovered over the gathering. His voice rang out, amplified by neural mic. This table is not sanctioned. It violates zoning protocols. You're all ordered to disperse now. The students froze, but Elias stood up slowly, his hands raised. On what grounds? Karen's voice was cold. On the grounds of unauthorized species. Congregation. The term hit like a bomb. Unauthorized species congregation. The phrase wasn't from the Academy rulebook. It was lifted from an ancient law, one long buried in the Federation's archives. A law used to segregate during the early cycles of colonization. A law no one dared say aloud for centuries. And Karen had just weaponized it. The moment hung heavy in the air. Iris stood to. Her voice was soft, but every word was crystal clear. Then enforce it. On record. Tell the galaxy that we are unworthy of a table. Karen hesitated. He hadn't expected resistance. Not here. Not from her. The drones hovered, confused by the conflicting commands, and then, a miracle. A dozen red dots flickered in the air, targeting reticles from high-range sniper turrets. Perched atop the defense towers, Earth Command had seen the feed. They had overridden local drone protocol. A voice echoed through the comms. This is Captain Maravos of Earth Command. Stand down. Zaranthian drones. We are enforcing interspecies dignity statutes per Article 7. Gas rippled through the plaza. Karen's face turned pale. Students began filming, broadcasting. The moment was no longer isolated. It was galactic. And in that silence, Elias picked up his drink, toasted to the tower above, and said, guess, we'll eat here every day from now on. Night fell over the city like a curtain of glass and steel. The Grand Academy, usually bathed in a tranquil hue of diplomatic blues and silvers, now pulsed with silent alarms. Not the kind that blared through loudspeakers or summoned troops. These were subtler bureaucratic alerts, notifications to sector governors, closed-door messages to the High Cultural Council, warnings to Earth's diplomats. Because what happened at the shadow table wasn't just insubordination. It was symbolic rebellion captured, clipped, and blasted across every news node from the icy moons of Jul the Ninth to the orbital colonies of Terra Prime. For many, Elias Riker had become a hero. For others, a liability. At dawn, Alira was pulled from her dorm by the Peacekeeper agents. No explanation, no warrant, just a tall, silent figures with blank visors and emblems of Protective Harmony Division on their shoulders. They didn't cuff her, but they didn't have to. Their presence was threat enough. Elias heard about it 20 minutes later when Macioro arrived at his quarters in a panic. Shaking and breathless, they took her, no one knows where. Not even the Registrar AI. She's been removed. Elias didn't wait. He sprinted through the Academy's halls, stormed into administration, kicked in the locked door of the disciplinary office, and demanded answers. But all he got was cold stares and passive shrugs. Finally, one professor, an older human from Earth, pulled him aside. She's being processed, he whispered. They'll say it's for mental evaluation or hybrid sensitivity review, but it's a purge, quiet, legal. Elias's chest burned. A purge? Alira hadn't broken a single law. She hadn't started a fight. She hadn't even raised her voice. All she had done was exist and be seen. He stormed back to his room, activated his neural link, and uploaded everything he had. The footage of her being taken, the court-like confrontation with Karen, the order from Earth Command, the crowd's reactions, the drones, the laser sights. Then he posted the message. They took her for sitting at a table. They took her for sharing food with me. Her name is Alira. She is a hybrid, and she is worth more than your silence. The video hit 2 million views in an hour. By midnight, it was 30 million. Federation ministers tried to suppress it, but humans, especially those from the outer colonies who knew what it meant to be outcast, spread it like wildfire. Hashtag Justice for El Ira began trending. Digital graffiti lit up on megascreens at 14 megacities, and then the cracks appeared that evening. The Peacekeeper detention pod transporting Alira was quietly rerouted. It was supposed to head to the Hybrid Evaluation Center in Sector 5. Instead, it took a long detour into the outskirts, dark, isolated space, a shadow operation. No cameras, no questions. Just quiet removal. But they didn't account for Riker. He had already tracked her. Using a hack beacon from the food tray drones, he'd embedded it during lunch on day 3. He locked onto the Peacekeeper shuttle's path. It was parked in a forgotten lot. Half a click from the main highway. Elias arrived first, armed with nothing but a plasma torch and an old human mining suit. From the Academy's engineering wing, he crouched in the dark watching, breathing, waiting. And then the guards emerged. They dragged Alira out. She was drugged, barely conscious. Her glow dimmed, her steps unsteady. That's when Elias moved. He didn't wait for backup. There was none coming. He didn't radio command. They'd already warned him to stand down. Instead, he triggered a magnetic pulse that fried the guards' boots, disabling their mobility stabilizers. Then he charged. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't trained combat, but it was desperate, raw. He rammed the first Peacekeeper with a shoulder tackle, breaking his visor and knocking him cold. The second drew a shock baton, but Elias blocked it with his torch, taking the full current through his arm as he punched the guard square in the gut. By the time it was over, he could barely stand. Sparks danced across his vision. His suit was scorched, but Alira was alive. He held her gently, whispering her name until her eyes fluttered open. "Elias," she breathed, barely a whisper. "Got you," he replied. "You're not going anywhere without me." He carried her out of the darkness, limping, bloodied, and victorious. The night after Elias rescued Alira, nothing was the same. She lay on a medic's table deep inside the basement of the human cadet barracks, off record, off grid. Elias had trusted no official channel. A sympathetic medbot handled her vitals. In silence, while Elias paced like a lion in a cage, Alira's glow had begun to return. Soft pulses of light moved beneath her skin like a living nebula. Her body trembled, not just from the drugs, but from disbelief. She whispered, "You came for me." Elias stopped pacing. "Of course I did. You could have been expelled. In prison." He smiled weakly. Wouldn't be the first time humanity broke rules for something worth protecting. Tears welled in her eyes, but she turned her head ashamed to show vulnerability. Even now, Elias knelt beside her. "They came for you because you scared them, Alira. You sat at a table and made them look small. That's power." Meanwhile, outside the Academy, that power was spreading. Dozens of hybrids across the Federation, those who had long accepted their place in the shadows, began to speak out. Video clips appeared of others eating in forbidden zones, refusing to wear their assigned color-coded badges, or demanding access to shared libraries and simulation rooms. The reaction was nuclear. Some academies welcomed the protest, issuing apologies and reversing policies. Others doubled down, sending in peacekeepers and locking down campuses on Zaranthia. The Grand Academy responded the only way they knew how, with control. A Federation broadcast lit up every holoscreen across the campus, effective immediately. All hybrid students are to be relocated to secure housing zones for their own protection. Disruption of Academy harmony will not be tolerated. Human Cadet Elias Riker is hereby suspended pending tribunal review. The words were sterile, hollow, but students had seen the truth already. That afternoon, when Elias stepped outside his barracks with Alira beside him limping, but upright, they were met by silence. Not from guards. Not from drones, but from hundreds of students gathered across the plaza. Hybrids. Humans. Even some Zelvani. They stood, arms crossed, defiant, waiting. Karen appeared again, flanked by a security detail. He barked through a speaker. "All unauthorized gatherings are in violation of Academy Order Z49. Disperse immediately." Elias looked at Alira. She nodded. They stepped forward, and Elias raised his voice, not loud, but sharp, every word slicing through the tension. "They told us it was about balance, about tradition, about species harmony. But what they really meant was silence, obedience, fear. They feared her, so they tried to erase her. But here she stands, and now we all do." There was a pause. Then Mekuro stepped forward and said, "My name is Mek. I've cleaned your waste bins for 3 years. Today I eat with you, Another voice. I'm Jorah. Half-Terran. I was told to wear gloves so I wouldn't taint the console. I'm done apologizing. Dozens more names declarations pledges a river of truth flooding over years of institutional rot. Even some professors in the balconies stood in stunned silence, unsure if they were witnessing treason or salvation. Karen shouted one last time, "This is not your table." Alira looked directly at him, her glow now fully restored. She stepped forward, her voice crystal clear, then built a bigger one, and the crowd erupted. Within minutes, the standoff was broadcast live across 10 sectors. Earth Command issued a ceasefire order to all Federation enforcement units. Peacekeepers backed down. The Grand Academy's Board of Governors called an emergency vote. The Hybrid Relocation Act repealed. Elias Riker's suspension lifted. But it wasn't over. This wasn't just a protest anymore. It was the start of a movement. By the 7th day, the Grand Academy no longer resembled the polished pillar of peace it once claimed to be. Hallways once filled with quiet conversation now buzzed with arguments, chants, and accusations. Every stairwell was layered with torn posters of unity and scrawled symbols of resistance. Even the massive hologram of the Federation's founding charter, a rotating monument at the center of the main atrium, had been hacked. Now it displayed Alira's glowing face, pulsing with light, along with the phrase, "We exist, we belong." For the elite, this was anarchy. For the forgotten, it was the beginning of freedom. Inside a private conference chamber deep beneath the central tower, chaos roared behind closed doors. Zelvani dignitaries, human diplomats, Tyrellian advisors, and robotic AI counselors debated across a fractal glass table. A blue-skinned high commissioner slammed her fist down. "You're telling me a single human cadet and one hybrid girl had to stabilize an entire academic sector?" A Terran diplomat replied coldly. "They didn't destabilize anything. They exposed that your stability was built on exclusion." Karen's father, Lord Vel Karen, sat at the far end, fuming. "This rebellion must be crushed. It's spreading. I've received messages from 7 hybrid communities across the system. They're mobilizing." An AI moderator responded in perfect calm. "Mobilizing or awakening?" Lord Karen's fingers clenched. "If the Federation won't suppress this, Zelvani rule will." That phrase set off alarm bells. The word rule wasn't accidental. The Academy had never been neutral. It was a Zelvani institution wrapped in a Federation banner, and now its illusion of impartiality was burning. Meanwhile, outside in the courtyard, Elias and Alira faced a new kind of pressure. No longer a fringe rebellion, their movement was now being dragged into something far larger: politics. They were offered interviews, sponsorships, even diplomatic immunity by certain Terran senators. Everyone wanted a piece of the fire they had started, but they didn't trust any of them. Alira sat with Elias under the shade of a crashed food delivery drone, now a symbol of the old system, rusting and forgotten. "I didn't mean for this," she whispered. "I know. They want to make me a figurehead, a mascot. You're more than that," Elias said. "You're the proof they tried to hide." Alira hesitated. "They're going to use us, Elias, twist us, then erase us again once they fed off our story." He nodded. "Then we write the ending ourselves." That afternoon, the Academy Board announced a formal declaration. The Grand Academy would be temporarily shut down for renovation, security improvements, and systemic review. But everyone knew what it meant. It meant fear. It meant loss of control. It meant that after centuries of carefully sculpted power structures, one simple act of shared meal had broken the dam. And yet, this wasn't the end. Because that night, Elias received a coded message on a private channel, encrypted, marked from Sector 17. "The remote hybrid slums orbiting Titanus, we saw your fight. We are ready to rise. But we don't need another speech. We need a leader." Elias looked to Alira. Her eyes reflected the message screen. She didn't blink. And then she said, "Then let's show them what a leader looks like." The skies above Zoranthia darkened as if the galaxy itself were holding its breath. In the orbiting chamber of the United Federation Assembly, a colossal, ring-shaped station suspended above the capital planet. Thousands of species had gathered: ambassadors, delegates, dignitaries, and warlords. For the first time in 300 years, a special emergency hearing had been called, not because of a planetary invasion, but because of a girl, a hybrid girl. Born of 2 bloodlines, the Federation refused to let bleed together. Elira. She stood now in the Grand Assembly Hall, a space vast enough to fit cities. lit by shifting stars through the transparent ceiling. Holograms of entire planets floated around the chamber, mapping the systems whose peace was now in jeopardy. At her side stood Elias, cleaned up, patched up, but still refusing to wear any uniform. Not Earth, not Federation, not anyone's pawn. They had been summoned under the guise of testimony, but they knew better. This was a trial, not a guilt, but of legitimacy. Was her existence valid? Was her defiance acceptable? Should the galaxy allow those like her to sit at the table or forever eat in the shadows? The hall buzzed with debate. The Zelvani High Judge rose first. Hybrids have always been welcome as long as they respected tradition. This uprising, this chaos, stems from insubordination, not injustice. A thunder-eyed craft war ambassador from the Rim snarled. You enslaved her with a smile. Now you fear her freedom. A Terran diplomat countered calmly. This isn't just about Alira. It's about the millions who share her story and what we've been too afraid to change. Then silence fell. The High Moderator, a towering synthetic being with a body like liquid chrome, turned to Alira. Speak. Alira stepped forward. No notes, no translator, no advisors. Just her voice and her glow. I grew up believing I was a stain, that my parents were wrong for loving the cross borders, that I had to stay quiet, stay clean, stay grateful, and I did. For years, I ate outside, not because I wanted to, but because you needed me to. You said peace required sacrifice, but that peace only existed for the pure, the perfect. The pet agreed. When I sat at that table, I didn't start a war. I just stopped hiding. And when she looked to Elias, sat with me, the world showed its truth. Your laws protect buildings. Your drones protect borders. But who protects dignity? She paused. The hall was frozen. Then she whispered, we don't want to destroy the Federation. We want a seat at its heart. And if that breaks it, maybe it deserves to break. The words were fire. Within hours, every system received the footage entire. Hybrid colonies broadcast the speech on loop. The Academy's image was torn from its seal. The shadow table became a symbol of resistance, of hope, but also of war, because the Zelvani declared an emergency cultural breach. They threatened to withdraw from the Federation if reforms were passed. They were joined by two other core worlds. The vote was scheduled for 48 hours later, one vote that would determine whether hybrids would be recognized as equal citizens with all rights and protections, or condemned to remain, legally and forever, beneath the table. And while the diplomats argued in marble rooms, something else stirred below. Malicious. Radical purity groups, a fleet of rogue ships launched from a Zelvani moonbase, headed toward Titanus, the hybrid world that had declared support for Alira. The first shot was coming. That night, Elias and Alira sat on the edge of the Assembly's private skydeck. Beneath them, the galaxy glimmered like a field of diamonds. Alira asked, what if they vote against us? Elias smiled grimly. Then we stopped asking. The air inside the council tower thickened as war drums thundered, not on a battlefield, but inside hearts suddenly aware of their cowardice. The scandal was no longer contained within the cafeteria or between a girl and a human boy. It had reached the legislative soul of Zelkara, where every word could spark rebellion or revolution. Kale sat alone in a waiting chamber outside the Grand Tribunal chamber, his wrists bound with a luminous restraint that pulsed with his heartbeat. The decision to place him under arrest hadn't been made out of necessity. He hadn't resisted, hadn't shouted. No, it was to make a statement. That defiance, no matter how noble, would not be tolerated. Across from him sat Ashara, her face unreadable beneath the silk gray veil. Tradition forced her to wear inside government buildings. No one had dared to aggress her yet, not as the victim, nor as a witness, not as a person, just a complication behind the thick golden doors. The High Council debated the fate of them both. Whispers flooded the streets of Zelkara as fast as the news feeds. A human broke protocol for a half-breed. She was just an orphan girl, born of a scandal. Is this the start of something dangerous? Dangerous indeed. Kale glanced at Ashara, whose shoulders were squared as if she bore the weight of two empires on them. In truth, she did. The empire of blood and the empire of silence. She was tired of wearing them both. A chime rang. The doors opened. Kale of Earth, Ashara, daughter of none. The council will now receive you. Inside, the chamber was cathedral-like in size. Pillars of white jade spiraled up into a glowing ceiling that mimicked daylight. The 13 council members sat in curved thrones, forming a crescent. Their forms hidden in ceremonial garb that erased all identity. Justice was to be blind. It was also cold. The High Speaker's voice echoed. Human Kale, you are accused of violating Directive 117 of Interspecies Integration Protocol, engaging in social disruption by interfering in the social segregation norms of Zelkara. His tone sharpened. Do you understand the weight of this transgression? Kale stepped forward. I do, but I reject its legitimacy. The chamber shifted. Murmurs. A couple of counselors leaned forward. You reject our laws? The High Speaker asked, more intrigued than offended. I reject the cruelty they enable. I reject the lie that heritage defines worth. I reject the notion that anyone should eat outside, alone, in the cold, because of something they didn't choose. A ripple of tension surged across the room like a silent quake. Then he turned to Ashara. She's braver than all of us. You tried to silence her by making her invisible. You failed. She is here, and the whole galaxy is watching. The silence that followed was not empty, it was heavy. Ashara stepped beside him, uninvited, and removed her veil. I am not ashamed, she said, her voice calm, but loud enough to reach every corner. Not of who I am, not of how I was born. I carry blood from both sides of the war that ended your ancestors. I am living proof that survival isn't purity, it's unity. Some council members recoiled. Others paused, blinking slowly. One even looked down Dot, and then she said it. I ate outside not because you forced me. I ate outside because none of you had the courage to sit beside me. Her words hit harder than any accusation Kale could have made. It wasn't law that was guilty, it was cowardice, generational fear disguised as tradition. From the back of the chamber, an unexpected voice pierced the tension. She's right. It was Counselor Byron Old, silver-skinned, and formerly a hardliner. We hid behind honor to preserve prejudice, but honor is not served by cruelty. The High Speaker turned toward him. Surprised Dot, another voice joined. A girl who has no title spoke like a ruler. Perhaps we should ask who truly deserves to lead. Counselor by counselor, the tide shifted. Not all agreed, but enough did. Enough to stir chaos, enough to spark change. Then came the vote. Dot, by a majority of 7-6. The council declared Ashara would be formally recognized as a free citizen of Zelkara. Kale's charges would be dropped. Directive 117 was to be reviewed for reform, and the cafeteria would be integrated immediately. They had cracked the stone, not broken it, but cracked it wide enough for light to pour through. Dot as Kale and Ashara walked out of the chamber. The city was not quiet. It buzzed, howled, burned with questions. But for the first time, the girl who used to eat outside walked in the center of the capital, side by side with a human, not hidden honored, not for who she was born as, but for who she chose to be. The council chambers were never meant to hold such a crowd. Once a hollow hall of ceremonial privilege and cloaked injustices, the marble and gold interior now throbbed with a new kind of electricity. Hope. The tribunal had long since collapsed, its judges dethroned by public demand. In their place stood a new panel of representatives elected by both native Zalari and human settlers alike, a symbol of integration, of long overdue justice, and at the center of it all, Alira. Gone were the days when she sat alone beneath the open sky to eat her meals in shame. Today, she stood tall in a flowing robe of fused Zalari fiber and earth silk designed by artists from both worlds. Her iridescent markings glowed not with subjugated bloodline, but with pride, with power. This wasn't a trial. It was a declaration. The holoscreens projected her image across systems, from orbiting satellites above Eero 7 to underground bunkers. On Europa, billions watched as Alira took the podium and adjusted the crystal mic. Her voice was calm, but there was an undertone of steel core forged in exile and humiliation. I once ate beneath your tables, not by choice, but by your decree. You called my bloodline dirty. You named my culture primitive. But let me tell you what you can never erase. Truth. The room held its breath. You feared unity, feared that our joining would end your monopoly on control. But the truth is diversity was your salvation, and it was mine. The camera panned briefly to Ethan, standing silently behind the diplomats, no longer a fugitive. He had been reinstated as a galactic protector, but he was more than that. He was her shield, the man who had chosen empathy over orders. A small girl approached Alira from the crowd, her skin a radiant blend of human bronze and Zalari blue, a symbol of a generation. Unburdened by hate, Alira knelt and hugged her tightly. The moment shattered even the hardest cynics watching the broadcast. Alira stood again. Not for vengeance, not for applause, but for legacy. To the old world that cast me out, I say this, your time is over. To the new world watching, let us build something worthy of our pain. Thunderous applause erupted, not just in the chamber, but across entire systems. On Earth, Zalari settlements, space stations, and mining colonies' cheers echoed as if they'd all been waiting for this moment. And somewhere, in a quiet field under the twin suns of Eero 7, a single empty bench stood beneath the tree untouched. Once a place of exclusion, now a memorial to the girl who changed everything simply by refusing to stay small.